Karma lives in the body, not the stars. Take a deep breath with me. Let your shoulders soften, and just for a moment, feel what it's like to simply exist. Not to solve, fix, or chase, but to simply sit, here, now, in the truth of your own body. You might not realize it yet, but your body is speaking. It always has been. A Zen master once said to his disciple, "Your karma is not written in the stars. It's not sealed in some ancient scroll. It's etched into your breath, your spine, your posture. Your body is the ink. Karma is the script." These words have stayed with me for a long time. We often think of karma as something distant, maybe as punishment, maybe as reward, waiting for us in another life, something we'll deal with someday. But what if karma isn't far away? What if it's happening right now, whispering through every sensation you feel? Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a pain that the doctors couldn't explain? A tightness in your chest when you're not sick? A weight on your shoulders even when you're not carrying anything? These aren't just metaphors. In many spiritual traditions, especially in Zen and Buddhist teachings, your body is seen as a living mirror of your soul. Every emotion you suppress, every truth you ignore, every regret you carry, your body remembers. You see, the mind is clever. It tells stories. It finds logic. It justifies. It distracts. It tries to stay safe by staying busy. But the body? The body doesn't lie. It doesn't intellectualize. It doesn't perform. It feels. And in feeling, it reveals. The tension in your jaw may be an unspoken truth. The ache in your back could be the burden of guilt you've never named. The fatigue that won't leave might be the exhaustion of living out of alignment with your soul's path. Have you ever noticed how your breath changes when you're around someone you don't trust? Or how your stomach knots when you say yes to something your heart wants to refuse? That's karma, not as divine punishment, but as unprocessed experience. And your body holds it all. In Zen, we don't ask the body to perform or to look perfect. We ask it to teach. We listen, not with analysis, but with presence. This may feel strange at first. After all, we're trained to think that healing comes from the outside, from medicine, from instruction, from fixing what's wrong. But the body isn't something broken to be fixed. It is a sacred parchment, written in sensation, in breath, in pulse. It's a scripture that tells the truth when the mind forgets. So I invite you, in this moment, to turn inward, not to judge, but to notice, not to control, but to become curious. What patterns have you repeated again and again? What emotion rises when you place your hand over your heart? What have you tried to forget that your body still remembers? The answers aren't in the sky. They're not in a guru's words, or even in mine. They're in you, in your breath, in your bones, in the quiet ache you've learned to live with. The truth is, your body is not the obstacle on your spiritual path. It is the path. And the pain you feel, it may not be your enemy. It might be the teacher you've been waiting for. So take another breath. Let it be slow. Let it be real. And as you exhale, ask gently, what is my body trying to show me that my mind has been too afraid to see? Let's begin this journey, not away from karma, but deeper into it. Not by resisting what hurts, but listening to what's true. This is where healing begins. Part 1. The Pain in the Back, a Burden Unreleased. There was a man I once knew, a quiet seeker. He wasn't chasing enlightenment or trying to escape the world. He was simply searching for peace. But one morning, he awoke with a pain in his lower back. It wasn't sharp enough to send him to the hospital, and yet it wasn't dull enough to ignore. It was just there, stubborn, steady, like something ancient that had finally found a voice. At first, he did what many of us might do. He stretched. He realigned his posture. He practiced deep breathing, used healing herbs, and even fasted, believing that maybe, just maybe, his body would cooperate again. But the pain stayed. And oddly, it grew louder when he sat still. During meditation, what was once subtle became undeniable. The ache pulsed through him, not with anger, but with insistence, as if it had been waiting years for him to stop running and finally listen. So he did. He stopped trying to fix it and simply sat with it. And that's when something shifted. He felt, not with his hands, but with his awareness, that this pain wasn't just physical. It was memory. It was guilt. It was the quiet weight of things he never spoke aloud. In Zen philosophy, the lower back is not just a cluster of muscles and bones. It's what some call the spiritual shelf, where we store the burdens we carry for others, where unspoken responsibilities, hidden regrets, and silent guilt are tucked away, quietly shaping the way we move through the world. And if you've ever felt pain in your lower back, maybe it's worth asking, who are you still carrying? What part of your story haven't you allowed yourself to forgive? Sometimes we carry the weight of people we've long let go of on the outside, but never on the inside. Sometimes we carry the pressure to be the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never breaks. But here's the truth. The body remembers every weight we agreed to bear, especially the ones we never meant to. And pain? Pain is not always a punishment. Often, it's just the body's way of asking, are you ready to let this go? That morning, the seeker didn't move away from the pain. He didn't resist it. He bowed to it, literally. He folded forward, gently, as if making an offering of surrender. And as he did, the ache softened. Not gone, but changed. It was no longer a wound. It had become a message. We often think healing looks like relief, but sometimes healing looks like revelation. So if your back carries pain, especially the kind no scan can explain, pause for a moment. Ask not, how do I fix this? Ask, what is this here to teach me? And listen, not with your mind, but with your breath, with your presence. Because the back doesn't just hold your body upright. It holds the weight of everything your soul hasn't laid down yet. And maybe, just maybe, today is the day you finally set it down. Part 2. The hands that hold emotion. There was a morning when he stood beside a mountain stream. The air was cold, but not bitter. The water crystal clear, moving gently over stones. He knelt down and dipped his hands in, and paused, because something didn't feel right. His fingers were stiff, not frozen, not in pain exactly, just resistant, like they didn't want to move even though they could. And deep down he knew it wasn't the weather. It was something else, something older. In Buddhist philosophy, the hands are more than tools. They are extensions of the heart, of action, of doing. We reach with our hands, we hold, we grasp, we defend, we cling, and sometimes we refuse to let go. The seeker sat beside the stream and began to remember. Moments where his fists clenched, not out of strength, but out of anger. Times when his palms sweated, not from heat, but from jealousy or fear. Situations where he reached to control, to shape an outcome, or to protect himself, without even knowing it. And suddenly, it made sense. His hands weren't reacting to the cold. They were responding to the weight of unexpressed emotion. Have you ever noticed this? How tightly we grip the steering wheel when we're upset. How our fingers tense when someone challenges us. Or how our hands ache, not from work, but from carrying what we refuse to release. Sometimes the body speaks through the places we use the most, and the hands, they tell the truth about how we act in the world. A Zen scroll once said, "Let go or be dragged." And that morning, beside the stream, the seeker made a different choice. He sat in stillness, closed his eyes, and imagined light, soft, healing light, pouring into his palms. With every exhale, he released a name, a moment, a wound. One by one, they left him, not in a dramatic burst, but in quiet, unseen ways. He let go of the person he tried to control. He let go of the version of himself that always had to be right. He let go of the story where pain made him strong. And as his hands softened, something else softened too. His heart. Because when the hands are no longer clenched, the heart no longer needs to defend itself. When the fingers no longer grasp, the soul can begin to open. Let me ask you, what are your hands holding that your heart no longer wants? What would happen if you gave yourself permission to release it? Not all pain is punishment. Some of it is just pressure, asking to be met with presence. The seeker didn't need a miracle. He just needed to remember, the hands can heal when the heart is ready to forgive. So maybe today you try it too. Sit quietly, breathe gently, place your hands where you can see them, and ask, softly, honestly, what am I still holding? Then, with kindness, let it go. Part 3. The Throat That Closed. Words Unspoken. Forgiveness Unoffered. It began with silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that presses. A quiet tightness in the throat. No cold, no infection, no visible cause. Just a growing pressure, as if something inside wanted to speak, but couldn't. He hadn't talked to anyone in days. Not because he was angry, not because no one was listening, but because deep down there were things he didn't know how to say. Have you ever felt this way? Like your words are stuck behind an invisible wall? Like there's something lodged between the heart and the lips, waiting, but never released? In spiritual anatomy, the throat is more than a passage for breath. It is the center of expression, the bridge between inner truth and outer voice. When it closes, it's rarely just about speech. It's about truth left unspoken, forgiveness left unoffered. The seeker sat beside a fire that evening. The warmth didn't ease the pressure in his throat. The quiet didn't offer peace. But something inside him whispered, "Speak." And so he did. Not to a person, not into a phone or a letter, but into the wind. Softly, almost trembling, he said, "I forgive you." Then again, "Forgive me." There was no dramatic release, no tears, no shouting, just breath. And then a cough. Not from illness, but from something finally loosening, not in his lungs, but in his soul. You see, the body doesn't separate emotional truth from physical function. What you hold back in spirit often gets held in flesh. Unspoken apologies become tension. Unexpressed grief becomes tightness. Forgiveness delayed becomes pressure that builds, until the body steps in to speak for you. I want to ask you something. Is there something inside you that longs to be said but hasn't been? Is there someone, maybe even yourself, you haven't forgiven yet? Not because you're cruel, but because the words felt too hard, too vulnerable, too late. But healing doesn't wait for perfect timing. It waits for honesty. Forgiveness in Buddhist practice isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of withheld truth. Not for their sake, but for yours. The seeker's throat didn't heal instantly, but with every whisper into the wind, something softened. And more importantly, he was no longer silent inside. So here's a small practice you can try. Sit in a quiet place. Place a hand gently over your throat and breathe. Ask yourself, not from the mind, but from the heart, what truth have I swallowed too long? Then, even if no one is listening, speak it, whisper it, write it, sing it. Let it out, not to control the past, but to liberate your present. Because sometimes the voice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be honest. And when you give your truth permission to move, the soul begins to breathe again. Part 4. The Eyes That Forgot to See. It happened slowly, not overnight, not all at once. His vision began to blur, not the world itself, but his focus. He could see, technically, but something felt off. Everything around him looked the same, but it no longer meant the same. He would look at the trees, but not see their stillness. He would gaze at the sky, but miss its invitation to breathe deeper. Even the faces of those he loved began to feel distant, like paintings behind glass. Have you ever felt this way? Like you're going through the motions, but not really seeing the life you're living? In Buddhist insight, the eyes are more than just organs of sight. They represent clarity, the ability to perceive not just what is in front of you, but what is true. When we live too long in illusion, whether it's distraction, denial, or delusion, our inner vision begins to fade. Not just spiritually, but sometimes quite literally. And that's what happened to the seeker. He had spent months searching for answers outside of himself. He looked for meaning in books, in teachers, in signs from the universe. He scanned the horizon for something to anchor him, never realizing he was avoiding the mirror in front of him. Because often, the truth isn't found out there. It's found when we finally dare to look inward. The eyes blur when the soul is overwhelmed, when our mind is flooded with noise, when we avoid truths that are uncomfortable but necessary. So he did something simple. He sat still, closed his eyes, not to escape, but to return. He breathed slowly, deeply, and instead of looking outward, he turned his awareness inward. It wasn't easy at first. The fog didn't lift in one sitting, but with each breath, the noise quieted. And slowly, without force or urgency, something inside him began to clear. He didn't just see his surroundings differently, he saw himself differently. He noticed the ways he'd avoided hard truths, the dreams he'd postponed, the distractions he'd chased to avoid discomfort. And with that seeing came peace. You see, spiritual blindness doesn't come from broken eyes. It comes from misplaced attention. We forget to look within. We forget that clarity comes not from fixing the world, but from being fully present in it. So if your days have started to feel like a blur, if your mind feels foggy, even when your schedule is clear, maybe it's not your vision that's fading. Maybe it's your connection to what really matters. Try this. Close your eyes, breathe in, and ask gently, what have I been unwilling to see? Then open your eyes, not just to the world around you, but to the deeper truth beneath it all. Because real sight, clear sight, is not just with the eyes, it's with the soul. And when the soul begins to see again, life becomes not just visible, but sacred. Part 5. The Feet That Refused to Move. The Weight of Hesitation. He was climbing a quiet hill, nothing too steep. The path was clear, the weather gentle, his body strong enough. And yet, halfway up, his feet gave out. They didn't twist, they weren't injured, they just stopped. They burned, not with pain from exertion, but with a strange heaviness. Like each step forward was dragging something invisible, something old. He sat on a rock, confused. Why now? Why here? He'd walked farther, climbed higher before. But this wasn't about the hill. It was about what he was carrying. You see, in Zen philosophy, the feet represent movement, not just physical, but spiritual. They are our connection to direction, to destiny. They ground us, propel us, lead us forward. unless we're still tethered to the past. And that's what he began to realize. Every time he'd hesitated in life, every moment he'd held back from a decision, every choice avoided out of fear had left an imprint. And now his body was reminding him. Because hesitation isn't passive, it builds, and karma doesn't forget what you delay. Have you ever felt like that? Like your life wants to move forward, but something inside you is dragging its feet. Maybe it's the fear of repeating a mistake. Maybe it's the weight of a what if. Maybe it's the grief of leaving something behind, even if it no longer fits. The body remembers. And sometimes it doesn't stop you as punishment. It stops you as a message. Pause, it whispers. Look at what you haven't faced. So the seeker did something different. He stopped resisting. He didn't force the climb. He didn't criticize the fatigue. Instead, he bowed, not to defeat, but to the message. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and asked, "What am I still holding on to?" Memories surfaced, moments of doubt, opportunities missed because he waited too long, words he never said, paths not taken, not because they were wrong, but because he was afraid to walk them. And something softened, not in the hill, but in him. He stood again, not to conquer the path, but to surrender to it. And step by step, slow, steady, he moved. Not pulled by fear, not pushed by pressure, but guided by something quieter, something freer. Because sometimes the body won't move until the soul is ready to stop looking backward. If your feet feel heavy, if progress feels like a struggle, don't just push harder. Sit, breathe, ask, where am I still clinging to the past? What part of me is afraid of what's next? And when the answer comes, don't fight it, bow to it. Then, when you rise again, you may find the weight is gone. Not because the mountain changed, but because you did. Part 6. Chronic Pain. Lessons the soul has yet to learn. Pain has a way of staying with us. Not just the kind that flares and fades, but the kind that lingers, that returns, that sets up home in the same corner of the body again and again. We call it chronic. We take pills, we visit doctors, we stretch, rest, ice, heat, and yet it stays. What if the pain isn't just a malfunction in the body? What if it's a message from the soul? In the teachings of Buddhism and many ancient traditions, chronic pain is not always seen as illness. It is sometimes the echo of an unresolved lesson, a karmic thread still waiting to be seen, understood, and released. The seeker once felt this echo in his shoulder. No injury, no diagnosis, just a deep, aching presence that refused to be ignored. At first, he thought it was posture, age, or tension. But the more he fought it, the stronger it became. Until one day, he asked a different question. What if this isn't something to fix, but something to listen to? And so he sat. He breathed into the ache. And instead of trying to escape it, he entered it, with compassion, not resistance. Memories began to rise. Moments of anger he never spoke. Regrets he buried under logic. Guilt he thought time had erased, but his body remembered. Because that's the thing about karma. It doesn't punish, it teaches. And sometimes, when a lesson goes unlearned, it returns. Not as drama in the outer world, but as pain in the inner one. Have you noticed how some pain shows up in the same place again and again? The neck that stiffens every Monday morning. The lower back that aches after every hard conversation. The chest that tightens when you see a certain name on your phone. This isn't random. This is spiritual patterning. Our bodies are maps, not just of biology, but of memory, emotional, energetic, karmic. And chronic pain? It's the red flag that says there is something here that still needs your attention. I'm not saying ignore medicine or science, but alongside it, ask yourself, what emotion lives here? What truth have I ignored in this part of me? What wound have I kept alive by pretending it healed? The body cannot lie. Where pain persists, so does a message. And when we finally pause to honor that message, without judgment, without urgency, something softens. Not always the pain, but the story beneath it. You see, healing doesn't always mean the pain goes away. Sometimes it finally makes sense. So if you are living with pain that no treatment seems to solve, don't only ask what's wrong with your body. Ask, what am I still holding that my soul longs to let go of? Oftentimes, the most persistent pain is not a curse. It's a companion that stayed behind to remind you of a lesson you promised to learn. So listen, gently, not with fear, but with faith. Because the pain is not here to punish you. It's here to awaken you. And when the lesson is truly heard, the body begins to remember how to let go. Part 7. The Skin That Speaks. Rejection of the Self. The skin is the boundary between the world and the self. It's what meets sunlight, wind, and touch. It's the first thing others see, and sometimes it's the first thing we try to hide. But in Buddhist and holistic thought, skin is not just surface. It is a canvas, and often a confession. The seeker first noticed it during a quiet retreat. Patches of redness along his arms, itching without cause, flare-ups that appeared with no warning, then faded just as mysteriously. There was no allergic reaction, no new food, no change in detergent, only silence and time. And in that silence, the message became clear. His skin wasn't irritated, it was expressing. You see, when the soul rejects a part of itself, the body will try to shed it. And what we refuse to accept, emotionally, spiritually, often rises to the surface. Shame, guilt, a sense of being too much or not enough. These don't always show up in the heart first. Sometimes they appear in rashes, in breakouts, in skin that wants to hide or escape. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in your own skin? Not just figuratively, but literally? Have you ever found yourself itching at the invisible weight of disapproval, especially your own? In Zen, the skin is symbolic of identity, of personal boundaries, of how much of ourselves we allow the world to see. And when those boundaries are filled with self-judgment, the skin begins to react, not as punishment, but as a plea for reconciliation. Think of it this way. When you speak harshly to yourself, when you look in the mirror with eyes that reject, when you compare, diminish, or criticize your own being, where does that energy go? It doesn't disappear. It settles into cells, into sensation, into skin. And the body, in its deep intelligence, whispers, "Please stop fighting me. I'm not your enemy. I'm your messenger." So the seeker began a simple practice. Every morning before he showered, he would stand in stillness. He would place his hands gently on his skin and say aloud, "I'm sorry I've rejected you. I'm learning to accept you again, exactly as you are." And something began to shift, not just in his appearance, but in his presence. Because the skin clears when the war within quiets. This isn't magic, it's compassion. And compassion is the balm the soul has been waiting for. So if your skin has been speaking to you through breakouts, rashes, discomfort, ask gently, "What part of me have I been unwilling to accept?" And listen, not for diagnosis, but for truth. The skin does not need perfection, it needs permission. To belong, to be seen, to be safe in your own gaze. Because when you begin to love the skin you're in, not just cosmetically, but soulfully, the healing doesn't just show on the surface. It begins to bloom from within. Part 8. When the stomach can't digest life. The stomach is more than just a physical organ. It is a sacred center of willpower, of emotion, of spiritual processing. In ancient Buddhist wisdom, the belly, what some traditions call the hara, is seen as the root of vitality. It's where life is not just received, but digested, absorbed, transformed. And yet, for so many of us, this space feels blocked, tight, uncomfortable, reactive. The seeker began to notice this during quiet meals. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't overeating, and yet, every bite felt heavy. Every meal sat like a stone. He tried probiotics, herbal teas, fasting, but still the same discomfort returned. So he stopped asking, "What's wrong with what I'm eating?" and began asking something deeper. What am I struggling to digest in my life? You see, not all indigestion begins in the gut. Much of it begins in the soul. When we carry unprocessed emotions, regret from the past, anxiety about the future, guilt, grief, even resentment, they don't just live in our minds, they descend. They settle into the belly like unfinished business, because the belly is where we try to hold it all together. Have you ever noticed that when you're nervous, your stomach flips? Or when you feel betrayed, your appetite disappears? Or how when you're holding in grief, your digestion shuts down? That's not a coincidence. That's a conversation. The body doesn't separate emotional experience from physical process. To the body, it's all energy, and the stomach is where that energy gets absorbed or blocked. So many of us live as if we're trying to swallow life whole. We take on more than we can emotionally process. We suppress instead of express, and we hope that if we just keep going, our body will figure it out for us. But the belly doesn't work like that. It's not just a place of nourishment, it's a place of integration. And when something in our life remains unintegrated, something we haven't accepted, forgiven, or released, it shows up here. The seeker began to approach meals differently. Before eating, he would pause, place one hand on his belly, and ask, "What emotion am I bringing to this table?" Was it worry, shame, pressure to perform? And instead of pushing it away, he would simply breathe through it. Let it be seen, let it soften. Slowly, his digestion improved, not just of food, but of life. Because when we slow down, when we honor our feelings, when we stop rushing from one task to the next, our body begins to remember how to process again. Not just nutrients, but truth. So if you're struggling with chronic digestive issues, yes, check your diet, but also check your spirit. Ask, what have I been afraid to feel? What have I refused to release? What story am I still trying to swallow, even though it no longer nourishes me? Healing begins not just with what we eat, but with how we live. And when we choose presence over pressure, when we bless our food with stillness and meet our belly with compassion, something inside begins to relax. And in that moment, digestion becomes sacred again. Part 9. When the breath tightens, suppressed emotions and unlived truths. The breath is sacred. It's the first thing we arrive with and the last thing we leave with. It connects us to life itself, not just biologically, but spiritually. And yet, how often do we forget to breathe? Not in the literal sense, but in the deeper soul-level way. The kind of breath that fills not just the lungs, but the heart. The seeker noticed this one quiet afternoon. He wasn't running, he wasn't stressed, but his breath felt shallow, like something inside him was holding its own pause button. Each inhale was tight, each exhale incomplete. And it had been like that for days. No illness, no diagnosis, just a weight pressing softly against the ribs, as if his body was holding back something he hadn't yet allowed to surface. So he stopped. He placed his hand over his chest, closed his eyes, and asked, "What am I afraid to feel?" You see, in Buddhism, the breath is not just air. It is awareness. It's how the spirit flows through the body, unfolding, releasing, renewing. When we hold back emotions, when we suppress sadness, resist truth, or silence ourselves, the breath responds. It becomes shallow, tight, almost scared. Have you ever felt that? When tears rise but don't fall. When you want to say something, but your chest locks up instead. When you pretend everything's fine, but your breathing tells a different story. That's not weakness. That's the wisdom of the body trying to speak. Because the lungs are not just for oxygen. They are a bridge between the seen and the unseen, between emotion and embodiment. Uncried tears often live as tension in the chest. Unspoken truths can press against the diaphragm. Grief that has no voice turns into breathlessness. The seeker began to practice a simple meditation. With each inhale, he would say silently, "I welcome what is." And with each exhale, "I release what was never mine to hold." Over time, something softened, not just in his breathing, but in his being. Because breath is not something to force, it is something to remember. To breathe deeply is to tell your body, "I am safe now. I am present. I am willing to feel." So, if your breath has felt tight lately, if it catches for no clear reason, try asking, not "what's wrong with me?" but "what truth haven't I lived yet?" What emotion is sitting in the chest waiting for you to notice it? Let your breath be more than survival. Let it be prayer. Let it be medicine. Let it be the gentle wind that clears karma, not through rituals, but through presence. Because when you breathe with awareness, you don't just heal the lungs, you free the soul. Part 10. The weight we carry. Fear, protection, and the body's silent defense. Weight is often seen as a number, a calculation, a goal, a measurement of discipline, or the lack of it. But what if weight is not just physical? What if it's emotional, energetic, karmic? The seeker had struggled with his body for years, sometimes gaining, sometimes shrinking, never quite feeling at home. He tried diets, fitness plans, fasts, but nothing lasted. Because what he didn't realize was, he wasn't trying to change his body. He was trying to change what he was holding inside of it. In Buddhist thought, the body is not a battleground. It's a messenger. And sometimes, when the soul is afraid of judgment, of heartbreak, of failure, the body builds walls. Weight, in this view, is not always a problem. It can be armor. For some, extra weight becomes a shield, protection from emotional invasion, unwanted attention, or vulnerability. It's as if the body says, "If I make myself bigger, I'll feel safer." For others, extreme thinness becomes its own cry, a quiet form of self-rejection, a way of disappearing. If I take up less space, maybe I'll be less of a burden. Neither is truly about food. They are about fear. And fear doesn't live in calories. It lives in memory. Ask yourself gently, when did I first feel unsafe in my body? What was happening in my life when this weight began to shift? Sometimes the answer is buried in the past, a betrayal, a loss, a deep longing to be seen or to be invisible. The body remembers, and when the heart cannot speak, the body acts. But here's the most important part. Your body is not your enemy. It's your protector. And when you approach it with shame or force, it tightens its guard. But when you approach it with compassion and curiosity, it begins to soften. The seeker eventually stopped asking, "How do I lose weight?" and started asking, "What is my body holding for me?" That question changed everything. Because beneath the extra pounds wasn't laziness, it was grief. Beneath the extreme thinness wasn't vanity, it was pain. And beneath the struggle was a soul trying to feel safe in a world that hadn't always been kind. So, if you are navigating weight challenges, pause, breathe, place your hands gently on your body and ask, what am I carrying that no longer belongs to me? What weight was never mine to bear in the first place? Let that be the beginning of your healing, not through control, but through care. Not through force, but through listening. Because when the soul feels safe, the body no longer needs to fight. And the weight, whatever form it takes, begins to release. Not out of shame, but out of freedom. Part 11. When the head hurts, the cost of overthinking and the call to stillness. The mind is a beautiful instrument, sharp, curious, always reaching for understanding. But when the mind refuses to rest, it becomes a wheel that spins too fast. And eventually, something begins to break. The seeker felt this first as a quiet tension, a light pulse at the back of the head after too many hours spent thinking. But thinking turned to spiraling, and spiraling turned into pressure. Like his thoughts were pressing against the inside of his skull, demanding attention, refusing silence. No amount of water helped, no stretching, no sleep, because the root of the pain wasn't physical, it was mental friction. In Zen, this is called the spinning wheel of the mind, where thought chases thought like waves crashing over waves. No pause between them, no breath beneath them. Just motion. Have you ever felt that? Where your mind becomes so busy solving, fixing, predicting, that you forget to simply be? Where the future won't stop calling and the past won't let go? Where your forehead aches and your eyes feel heavy, not from what you've done, but from how much you've thought? This is not just exhaustion. It is disconnection from presence. Because when we leave the moment, we begin to live entirely in the head, cut off from the wisdom of the body, the breath, the now. The solution isn't more caffeine or another productivity hack. It's not another app or a new meditation timer. It's far simpler than that. It's stillness. Imagine your mind as a pond. Every thought you toss into it becomes a ripple. But when you pause, when you truly stop, the water begins to settle. Clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes when the mud sinks and the surface becomes calm. The seeker began to change his rhythm. Instead of pushing through the pain, he would pause, mid-thought, mid-task, mid-sentence, and breathe. Just 3 slow breaths. That was his anchor. And then he'd ask, is this thought helping me or haunting me? Am I solving something real or spinning in fear? Most times, the answer was clear. He was just trying to outrun discomfort with logic. But the mind can't solve what the heart hasn't felt. So he slowed down, not just externally, but internally. And the headaches began to ease. Because the tension in the skull wasn't about failure. It was about disconnection. If you find yourself constantly overthinking, if your head feels tight or heavy without clear cause, try this. Find stillness. Close your eyes. Picture your thoughts as raindrops hitting a still pond. And with every exhale, let one ripple fade. Let the mind rest, not because you're giving up, but because you're coming home. You don't have to figure it all out right now. You just have to return to what's real. This moment, this breath, this stillness. Because when the mind slows, the body softens. And when the body softens, truth has space to rise. Part 12. When fatigue lingers, a soul out of alignment. There's a kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix. You rest, you take vitamins, you even cut back on your workload. But the fatigue remains, woven into your bones, humming behind your eyes, clouding your thoughts. This isn't just physical. This is something deeper. The seeker knew this well. He had been sleeping 8 hours a night, eating well, resting when needed. And yet, every morning felt heavy, like waking up with a body full of sand. At first, he blamed stress, then age, then the world. But eventually, he stopped asking, "What's draining me?" and started asking, "Where have I drifted away from my soul?" Because in Buddhist thought, fatigue is not always about depletion. Sometimes it's disconnection. When you live a life out of alignment with your dharma, your purpose, your soul's natural path, your energy slowly unravels. You might be productive, you might even be successful, but you are not alive. There's a subtle ache in doing things that no longer feel like yours. A quiet grief in saying yes to what your spirit already said no to. Have you felt it? That heaviness that comes not after a long day, but before one even begins. That slow, silent exhaustion from pretending, performing, pushing through. In Zen, we say, the soul gets tired not from doing too much, but from doing too little of what it was born for. The seeker began to look inward. What had once lit him up? What small inner voice had he silenced in favor of stability or approval? He remembered how he used to write, not for fame, but for truth. How he used to sit in stillness, not as a task, but as a homecoming. How he once felt energized by meaning, not just motion. So he started small. 10 minutes a day doing something his soul recognized. A walk without his phone. A conversation without pretending. A return to something that felt like him. And slowly, the fatigue began to fade, not all at once, but gently, because it wasn't just his body that had been tired. It was his spirit trying to get his attention. If you've been carrying this invisible weight, if no amount of rest ever feels like enough, ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What path have I abandoned to meet expectations? Am I tired or am I misaligned? Energy is not only found in sleep or food, it is found in truth. When you return to what is authentically yours, your pace, your purpose, your passion, you don't have to force motivation. It rises on its own. Because when the soul is at peace, the body remembers how to move again. So don't just rest, realign. Even a few degrees closer to your truth will make the difference. Not because life becomes easier, but because it becomes yours again. The body is the living scripture of karma. We often think of karma as something far away, a mystery written in the stars, a force working in the background, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. But what if karma isn't distant at all? What if it's closer than you think, whispering not from the heavens, but from within you? In Buddhist and Zen teachings, karma is not just some cosmic equation. It's not reserved for future lifetimes. It's not hidden in temples or sacred texts. Karma is alive in your posture, in your breath, in the way your body feels right now, even as you're listening. The truth is, your body is not separate from your spiritual journey. It is the journey, a living scripture that records everything your soul has not yet resolved. Every sensation is a sentence, every ache a forgotten page, every moment of peace a blessing written into your cells. And so the invitation is simple but profound, to listen. To stop trying to fix every discomfort and instead ask, what are you here to teach me? Because pain is not the enemy, avoidance is. When you resist your symptoms, you prolong your suffering. But when you listen to them, when you bow to them with humility and curiosity, something begins to shift. This is how karma dissolves, not by running away from the body, but by coming home to it. So, how do we begin to heal? Not through complexity, but through simple presence. Not through control, but through compassion. Here are 7 steps, 7 gentle invitations to begin releasing karmic patterns through the wisdom of your own body. 1. Listen to your pain without judgment. Don't label it as good or bad. Just let it speak. Sometimes all the body wants is to be acknowledged. 2. Respect the story behind the symptom. Ask, what happened when this pain began? Every symptom carries memory. Honor its root. 3. Let go of blame, including blaming yourself. Karma is not a punishment. It's a mirror, one that reflects where love and awareness are still needed. 4. Forgive the past. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's untying the rope. Until you forgive, the body must keep remembering for you. 5. Practice mindfulness daily, not as a task, but as a return. Even one conscious breath can rewire how karma lives in the body. 6. Learn through your symptoms instead of escaping them. Ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? The moment you ask sincerely, you begin to transform it. 7. Live your dharma, your soul's calling. When you align your actions with your deeper purpose, energy returns, not through effort, but through flow. Let this be your gentle reminder. Your body is not broken. It is not betraying you. It is not in your way. Your body is your teacher. It carries your karmic story, not to punish you, but to help you remember. To remember what you've hidden, to remember who you are, to remember the path back to your soul. So the next time your body speaks, through pain, fatigue, tension, or stillness, pause. Don't rush to silence it. Ask it softly, what truth are you holding for me? And listen. Because every sensation, no matter how subtle, is a bell. A call back to presence, a call back to yourself. S. If you found resonance here, if even one part of this journey has helped you see your body with new eyes, I invite you to stay connected. This channel is a space for quiet truths, slow healing, and shared awareness. If you feel called, subscribe gently, not to follow more noise, but to walk beside a rhythm that honors depth over speed. You won't get shouted at here. You won't be sold a quick fix. Just space. Just breath. Just reminders that you are not alone on this path. Take one last conscious breath with me. Inhale deeply, welcoming yourself. Exhale slowly, releasing what no longer serves you. The body is listening. And now, so are you. Please, I'll see you in the next moment we share.